I lit the last candle at exactly 2:59 p.m. Not because I'm superstitious, but because if I didn't have little rituals, I think I'd fall apart. The table was set for 3, my best china, the kind that only came out for Thanksgiving or if Randall's boss was visiting, which hasn't happened in over 2 decades. I laid out the good silver, the linen napkins I ironed that morning, and placed the cranberry sauce in a little glass dish with a silver spoon. Everything had to feel intentional. It was my first Christmas without Randall. He passed in March, 74. Good heart, terrible lungs. They said it was peaceful, that he went quickly. But there's nothing peaceful about waking up to silence after 50 years of shared mornings. Nothing peaceful about setting 3 plates when I know I'll only use 1. I wore the red dress, the one with the pearl buttons. Randall always said it made me look like I belonged on the front of one of those old Christmas records. I hadn't worn it in years. I did my hair the way he liked, even put on a little lipstick, and I made sure the house smelled like home. Sweet potatoes, brown sugar ham, and that green bean casserole recipe that took me 2 tries and 3 phone calls to get right. I even made cookies, chocolate chip, slightly burnt on the edges, just how Emily used to sneak them when she thought I wasn't looking. Her husband, Nate, pretends to be health conscious, but I know better. He always takes 2 when no one's watching. The tree was real this year, not one of those dusty, pre-lit ones from the garage. A fresh fir, fat and fragrant, with twinkling white lights and all the old ornaments. Our wedding photo and the little red frame, Emily's popsicle stick reindeer from 3rd grade, and the glass bird Randall glued back together in '91. I even hung the crocheted angel his mother made before she went blind. I didn't cut corners. I didn't want to feel alone. That was the plan. Invite Emily and Nate, just the 3 of us. A small Christmas, nothing fancy, just family, just not empty. By 1 o'clock, everything was ready. I had timed it down to the minute. Rolls wrapped in foil, ham resting, the tea chilling in the fridge. I turned on Bing Crosby and dimmed the overhead lights, just enough to let the candles do the work. For the first time in months, I felt something like anticipation. Not quite joy, but close. At 2:30, I texted her. "Everything's ready. See you both soon." Ting, ting. No reply. At 3 o'clock, I stood by the window, arms crossed in front of me, trying not to smudge the lipstick. I told myself they were running late. Holiday traffic. Maybe Nate forgot to get gas again. He does that. Maybe Emily needed more time to fix her hair. She always takes her time. At 3:15, I refreshed my phone. Nothing. I turned the music down. By 3:30, the rolls were back in the oven, the ham was cooling, and my heart was thudding like a drum I hadn't agreed to play. At 3:45, the doorbell rang. I nearly tripped over myself rushing to answer it. I smoothed my dress, patted down my curls, and opened the door with a practiced smile. It wasn't them. It was a courier, some poor college kid in a windbreaker, shivering and expressionless. He held out a manila envelope with my name printed neatly across the front. Delivery for Mrs. Helen Davis. I blinked. "That's me." He handed it over and walked away without another word. I watched him retreat to his car, engine still running, probably another delivery to make, another woman waiting for something that wouldn't arrive. I closed the door and stared at the envelope in my hands. Inside was a note, handwritten, Emily's handwriting, looped and graceful. "Mom, I'm so sorry. We decided to spend Christmas at Nate's mom's this year. It was kind of a last-minute thing. Hope you understand. Love, Emily." That was it. No call, no apology, no suggestion to reschedule. Just a warm kitchen, a table set for ghosts, a house that had worked so hard to feel alive, and now somehow felt even more hollow than before. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, clutching the letter, the smell of baked ham clinging to my dress, the candles flickering like they knew something I didn't. They hadn't forgotten. They'd chosen. And that was the moment I realized something had shifted. Maybe not just this Christmas, but a long time ago. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Until now. I didn't blow out the candles right away. I just let them burn. The flames trembled in their glass holders, casting little shadows that danced across the china. I stood there, still holding the letter, rereading it, like maybe a second glance would reveal something different, something softer, something that made sense. But it was still the same. Hope you understand. Understand what exactly? That I wasn't important enough? That after cooking for 2 days, steaming wrinkles out of a dress I hadn't worn in a decade, and pulling down the good china, I was worth a note hand-delivered by a stranger? The stuffing was still warm. The casserole, too. I poured a glass of sweet tea and sat at the head of the table. My chair. Randall's used to be across from me. I kept it there. I didn't have the heart to change it, even now. I looked across at the 2 empty plates, one for Emily, one for Nate, and tried to eat, but my throat wouldn't let me swallow. I'd spent 2 days cooking, not microwaving, cooking. The ham had been basted every half hour. Randall's cornbread stuffing made from scratch, not a boxed mix in sight. The mashed potatoes, whipped smooth with sour cream and butter, just how Emily liked them when she was little. And the pie, pecan, had taken all morning to get right. I even made a second one just in case they wanted leftovers. None of it mattered now. I turned off the music, blew out the candles. I packed everything away in plastic containers, sliding them into the fridge with shaking hands. I left the pie out. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me thought they might still come. They didn't. The phone never rang. No calls, no texts, not even a blurry picture of them by a tree or holding mugs of cider. Later that night, I sat down on the couch, the same spot where Randall used to snore through old Hallmark movies, and opened Facebook. I wasn't even thinking, just autopilot. There she was, Emily, posted on Nate's mother's page, smiling in a photo with a glass of wine in one hand and her other hand on Nate's knee. The table behind them was packed. Wine glasses, empty plates, gift bags, people laughing. The caption read, "So grateful to be surrounded by love this Christmas." I didn't comment. I didn't click like. I just stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the black border of the tablet. My house was silent. Hers was full. My table was untouched. Hers overflowed. They didn't forget me. They left me out. On purpose. And that's when it hit me. Not like a slap, but like a slow drop of cold water sliding down your back. You know it's coming, but it still shocks you. I wasn't just alone tonight. I had been alone for a while. Randall used to say, people don't change overnight. They just get quieter about it. I never knew what he meant until now. I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed on the couch long after the fireplace had gone cold. The lights on the tree still glowed soft and steady, like they were pretending everything was fine. But the room felt too quiet. Not peaceful, not serene, just empty, hollow. I thought about Christmases when Emily was little, the sound of her tiny feet running through the hallway, the way she used to yell, "Santa came!" before the sun was even up. Randall would stumble out behind her, grubbing his eyes, still half asleep, but smiling. He always smiled on Christmas morning. I used to make pancakes shaped like reindeer, burnt on one side, always. She never cared. I remembered the year she got her first bike. Randall had stayed up till 2 in the morning assembling it in the garage, then scratched up his knuckles trying to get the handlebars straight. He cursed under his breath the whole time, but when she saw it the next day, he teared up. She called it Sparkle. He called it the death trap. That was a good year. But now she posted photos on someone else's porch, smiled around someone else's table. I wasn't even an afterthought. Just forgotten. I tried to go to bed, but I couldn't lie still. The red dress was still hanging on the back of the chair, wrinkled now, like it knew it had been worn in vain. I peeled it off and tossed it into the laundry basket, pulled on a robe, and walked to the front door. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to feel air that wasn't heavy with stuffing and sweet tea. The porch was cold. Sharp. Winter cold. I wrapped my arms around myself and looked out at the street. Empty. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. And then I noticed it. Something. Tucked behind the flower pot by the door. A red envelope. I thought maybe it was a late card. A neighbor maybe. Or someone dropping off a note. I bent down, pulled it from its hiding spot, and saw my name on the front. Just Helen. No last name, no address. Inside, a single card. Helen, we hope you're doing okay. We really didn't mean to upset you. It was just easier this way. I didn't want to fight about it again. Please try to understand. Emily. No signature from Nate, no apology, no invitation to reschedule, just more of the same. We didn't mean to. Try to understand. Always me doing the understanding, always me doing the forgiving. I held the card in my hands until the wind nearly took it. Then I went back inside and slid it into the drawer by the phone. I didn't have the strength to throw it away. Not yet. I stood in the kitchen again, looking at the fridge. The containers were all stacked neatly. Ham, potatoes, casserole, pie still on the counter, untouched. Like offerings no one came to claim. I was tired, but it wasn't the kind of tired a nap could fix. It was a tired that had been building for years. A tired that Randall saw coming long before I did. And then I remembered something. A box. Randall had put it in the hall closet the year before he passed. I had asked what it was, and he just said, "You'll know when it's time." I hadn't thought about it since then. Until now. It was time. I hadn't opened the hall closet in months, maybe longer. It was the one with all the things that didn't quite fit anywhere else. The extra quilts, the mismatched pillowcases, the boxes of Christmas lights we never used. The top shelf still smelled faintly of cedar, a scent that always reminded me of Randall's old coat. He used to say closets were for holding on to what we couldn't bear to let go of. I stood on my tiptoes and nudged aside a stack of photo albums until I saw it. A plain cardboard box. No markings, no tape, just a rubber band holding the lid down. I pulled it out gently and carried it to the kitchen table. It was light, lighter than I remembered. I half expected to open it and find old receipts, maybe more photos, or one of Randall's half-finished crossword books. But when I lifted the lid, I found only 3 things. A small brass key, slightly tarnished but clearly cared for. A folded piece of yellowed paper with my name written on the outside in Randall's handwriting, and a printed document tucked neatly beneath them both. A property deed. I didn't open the deed right away. I just stared at the key. It was smooth at the edges, clearly used, but not recently. It looked like it belonged to an old lock, a cottage lock maybe, or something wooden. I turned it over in my fingers before finally unfolding the note. It was short. Randall never wasted words. If you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way I hoped. The key goes to the place I couldn't tell you about until now. I wanted you to have something that was yours, just yours, no one else's hands on it. Go to the study, top drawer of my desk. The rest is there. I read it twice. It didn't feel real, but then again, nothing about that day had. I walked slowly to the study. Randall's desk sat exactly where he left it. Dust on the lamp, pins lined up beside a stapler and a calculator. His reading glasses still hooked over the edge of the drawer like he'd be back any minute. I opened the top drawer. Taped to the underside was another envelope, this one thicker. Inside was a folded note, another key, this one marked with a tag that read "front door," and a legal-size sheet that made my breath catch in my throat. Another deed, my name on it. No joint ownership, no one else's signature, just mine. The address wasn't familiar. Somewhere in Hendersonville, 45 minutes from here. Randall had never mentioned owning anything else. I thought we'd poured everything we had into this house. Apparently, he had poured something elsewhere too, into something just for me. I picked up my phone and typed the address into Google Maps. It dropped a pin on a narrow road I didn't recognize. No photos, no business listing, just a red marker blinking in the middle of pine trees and quiet. I sat there staring at the screen, one hand gripping the brass key, the other flat against the deed. The room was still, like it was waiting for me to move. I had no idea what I was about to find, but I knew, deep down, Randall had planned this. Not because he doubted me, but because he doubted them. Because he saw what I hadn't wanted to see, and because he loved me enough to prepare for the moment they didn't show up. I didn't sleep. Again. By morning, the candles had melted into stubby little pools of wax, and the pie still sat on the counter like a question I couldn't answer. I watched the sunrise from the kitchen window, coffee untouched, coat already draped over the chair. At 8 a.m. sharp, I packed a small overnight bag, one change of clothes, a flashlight, my reading glasses, the deed, both keys, and out of instinct more than anything, a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Randall used to say, "Never drive hungry, just in case." That man prepared for everything, even the kind of day you never think will come. The roads were mostly clear, just a few patches of ice on the back roads. Christmas morning looked different from behind the wheel. Quieter, lonelier, empty gas stations, closed diners, a world still wrapped in sleep while I headed towards something I couldn't name. The GPS guided me past a faded hardware store and down a gravel path that didn't even have a sign. I had to slow to a crawl to spot the house number on an old wooden post, nearly swallowed by ivy. I put the car in park and just stared for a minute. It was a small white farmhouse, 2 stories with blue shutters and a porch that sagged slightly to the left. The stone steps were dusted with frost. It wasn't fancy, but it wasn't abandoned either. It looked cared for, like it had been waiting for someone. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the brass key. My hands trembled as I slid it into the lock. It turned without resistance. The door opened with a soft click, and the faint smell of cedar and dust drifted out. And somehow, just like that, I felt Randall. Not the memory of him, not the grief of him, the presence. It was warm inside, not hot, just warm enough to feel lived in or ready. There was a wooden bench in the entryway with boots lined up neatly beside it, a coat rack, and on it, one of Randall's old jackets, the brown one with the elbow patches he wore every winter. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, and there, on the mantel of a small stone fireplace in the living room, were framed photographs. One of Randall and me on our 35th anniversary, one of us at the beach, and another, one I didn't recognize, Randall sitting in a rocking chair on the porch of this very house, a coffee mug in hand, eyes crinkled in a half smile. The furniture wasn't matching, but it was familiar. The armchair looked exactly like the one from his reading corner at home. The side table had the same scratch he made assembling it back in '92. The bookshelf was filled with the same titles, arranged in the exact order he always kept them. It was like someone had taken fragments of our life together and gently rearranged them into this space. Not a replica, a continuation. On the coffee table was a folded note, written in Randall's hand. "This is yours, in case they ever forget who you are." That's all it said. But it said everything. I sat down slowly on the couch, running my fingers over the fabric. This wasn't just a house. It was a message. He had seen it coming. The slow unraveling, the dismissive glances, the way I was becoming background noise in Emily's life. He hadn't said anything, not directly. That wasn't Randall's way. But he'd noticed, and he'd prepared. He hadn't left me a place. He'd left me proof that I mattered, that I was more than leftovers in a fridge and a red dress worn for no one, that even if they turned their backs, he never would. I looked around, blinking through a rush of tears that didn't sting, not like the night before. These were different, warmer, steadier. This house wasn't an escape. It was an anchor, a quiet, sturdy, beautiful reminder. I still belonged somewhere.
Spent the rest of the morning walking through each room like I was visiting a memory I hadn't made yet. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon, though there was no food. The pantry was stocked: rice, canned vegetables, boxes of pasta, nothing expired. The fridge was unplugged but spotless. Even the drawers were labeled: measuring cups, spare batteries, tea towels. Randall, always the engineer, even in his tenderness. The bedroom had a quilt folded neatly at the foot of the bed, blue and cream with tiny stitches I recognized from our old guest room. The lamp on the nightstand was crooked. Randall never did fix that wobble, no matter how many times I reminded him. I smiled. But the study, that's where everything changed. It was tucked in the back of the house, small, with a single desk pushed under the window and a bookshelf that curved slightly from age. The same model he'd used for years, filled with old ledgers, worn notebooks, and manila folders. I opened the top drawer. There it was, a leather-bound ledger with a red ribbon marking the halfway point. His handwriting filled the pages, neat, calculated, steady. Every entry dated, precise. And as I read, my heart began to race. Financial notes, personal records, a timeline. Each page chronicled requests from Emily, from Nate. I had known. Apparently, Randall had, and he'd written it all down. The first entry was from 2014. Emily had asked for help, a small loan to help Nate start a landscaping business. Randall gave them $15,000. I remembered the thank you card. I even baked a pie to celebrate their new start. Then, in 2016, another request, this time $40,000. To invest in a rental property, the note said. Randall had declined. I had no idea any of this happened. In 2019, again, this time $60,000. Flipping houses. Randall said no, firmly. The ledger noted a strained phone call, followed by weeks of silence. I flipped to a new page and felt my stomach drop. A photocopy of a check, drawn from our joint account, $12,500, labeled kitchen renovation, signed in my name. Except it wasn't my signature. Not exactly. It was close, but I knew my loops, my slant, the way I crossed my T's low and long. This wasn't mine. Randall had noticed too. He consulted with the bank quietly, requested records, spoke to someone named Gerald apparently, and confirmed the funds had been used for a property in Tennessee. Emily and Nate's second home. They had forged my name, and they had done it while I was still cooking holiday dinners and buying birthday cards and trying to pretend everything was okay. Randall hadn't confronted me with it. He didn't want to break my heart while it was still beating beside his. But he saw it all, and instead of starting a war, he built a wall, one only I could access. The trust, the cottage, the ledgers, the documentation. He wasn't trying to hide anything from me. He was protecting me, not from grief, from betrayal. I leaned back in the desk chair and stared at the room, the ledger still open in my lap, the pages curling slightly at the corners. Randall had known, maybe before I even began to suspect it. And now, in this quiet house, he was showing me everything I had refused to see. This wasn't about a missed Christmas. It was about a pattern, a slow erasure. One request at a time, one forged signature, one skipped phone call. They weren't just pulling away, they were planning around me.
It was 2 days later when they showed up. I had just returned from Mr. Benton's office, Randall's accountant. He'd called me the morning after Christmas, said there were instructions left behind, meant only to be revealed if circumstances changed. They had. I learned more that day than I ever expected to. About the trust Randall had set up in my name, about the separate account, about the documents protecting me from exactly the kind of future I was now standing in. I hadn't even taken off my coat when I saw the headlights pull up outside. A familiar car. Emily's. I froze in the hallway, heart knocking against my ribs, breath catching somewhere between anger and fear. They hadn't called. They hadn't texted. They just appeared. I stepped behind the curtain and watched. The engine stayed running. Nate was in the driver's seat, tapping his phone. Emily sat stiffly in the passenger seat, staring at the house. Neither of them got out. Until the driver's door opened and Nate walked up the path, hands deep in his jacket pockets like he was protecting himself from more than just the cold. I opened the door before he knocked. He blinked like he hadn't expected that. "Hey, Helen," he said, smiling that tight, rehearsed smile. "We were, in the neighborhood." I said nothing. He cleared his throat. "Emily didn't want things to feel awkward. We figured maybe we could talk." "Now you want to talk?" His mouth opened, closed. "It's just, there's been some confusion about Randall's accounts. I've been going through some old files in the garage, and I thought maybe if you wanted help." "You mean now that you think I have something you want?" He blinked. "No, it's not. We're just concerned. Emily's worried. You've been acting different." "Different," I repeated. "Like someone who's finally seeing clearly?" He shifted his weight, glanced back toward the car. Emily still hadn't moved. "I know about the forged check." His face paled, just slightly, but enough. "I know about the rental house. I know about the requests, the ones Randall turned down. I know everything." Silence. "You didn't come here to check on me. You came to see what's left, to see if you still had access to it." He swallowed hard. "That's not fair." "What's not fair is spending Christmas alone while the people I raised sit at someone else's table and post about being surrounded by love." He looked down at the porch floor. "You all made your choices. You walked away. And now, because I didn't collapse like you expected, you're here, trying to play nice." "It's not like that," he muttered. "No?" I asked. "Then where's Emily?" He looked back at the car. "She thought it'd be better if I talked to you first." "Because she's afraid of what I'll say?" He didn't answer. I stepped back, opening the door just a crack wider, not to invite him in, but to end the conversation. "You should go." "Helen! Tell Emily I got her note and the message." He paused, like he wanted to argue, but then he turned and walked back to the car. I watched as he climbed in, leaned to her. She shook her head, the car backed out slowly, tires crunching over gravel, and then disappeared down the road. I closed the door. The house was still warm, but something inside me had gone cold. Not broken, not bitter, just still. I leaned against the wall and let out a long breath. They didn't come to make peace. They came to test the waters. And now they knew I wasn't drowning. The morning after they left, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the pie still in the fridge. Still untouched. Still perfect. Like some kind of shrine to the version of me who used to wait. Not this year. Not anymore. Dayla came over just after 10. She didn't knock.
She never does. She let herself in like she always had, carrying a binder, a hot loaf of cornbread, and that sharp, no-nonsense look in her eye that told me this wasn't just a social visit. "You ready to stop being polite?" she asked, setting her things down without waiting for an answer. I nodded. I was done being quiet, done hoping, done shrinking. We sat together with coffee and a determination I hadn't felt in years. While Dayla flipped through legal templates she'd printed from the church computer lab, I started writing. A letter. One I never thought I'd need. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was clear. Firm. It said that I was of sound mind, that I was managing my affairs, that I did not require oversight, intervention, or unsolicited help, that I would not be transferring any assets, accounts, or properties, that any attempt to suggest otherwise would be met with full resistance under the law. And then, in my own handwriting, the same handwriting they'd once tried to fake, I wrote one final line. I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am simply done being treated like a burden. We printed it, signed it, notarized it at Dayla's church. We sent certified copies to Emily and Nate. Dayla leaned back in her chair when it was done, crossed her arms over her chest, and said, "There. Now they can't say they didn't know." I stared at the letter sitting in the outgoing tray, the ink still drying. And then I said something I didn't plan to, something that came out before I could edit it down. "I'm done begging to be loved." Dayla didn't flinch. She just looked at me and said, "Say it again." So I did, and I meant it. I realized then that it wasn't just the dinner I was grieving, or the lost phone calls, or the empty chairs. It was the years I'd spent holding my breath, making myself smaller, tiptoeing around their coldness, praying that warmth would return. But the warmth hadn't disappeared. It had just been relocated here, in this house, in this new chapter, in the space Randall built and Dayla reinforced, and I was finally claiming. That night, I made my own list. Not a grocery list, not chores, a list for me. Paint the guest room. Plant flowers in the spring. Bake a pie just for myself. Take a trip to Charleston. Write Randall a letter. Simple things, things no one could take. And as I sat at the kitchen table with the window open, letting the cold creep in just enough to feel real, I realized something I didn't dare admit. They left, but I didn't disappear. I was still here, still standing, still mine. I didn't send out invitations with gold lettering or RSVP cards. I wrote names on index cards from the dollar store and handed them out at the senior center. I left 2 at the library, taped 1 to the back of the bulletin board at the post office. I mentioned it casually to the young man at the church art program, the one who teaches drawing to kids who don't talk much but smile wide when they're handed crayons. Christmas dinner, my place. Nothing fancy, just food, warmth, and people who show up. No one asked what to bring. They just said, "We'll be there." And they were. By 3 p.m. on Christmas Day, my little cottage, the one Randall left for me, the one that saved me, was full.
There were folding chairs borrowed from the church, extra place settings that didn't match. A plastic tablecloth covered the scratches on the kitchen table. The green bean casserole was slightly overcooked and someone spilled fruit punch on the rug by the door. It was perfect. Della brought her famous glazed ham and told everyone it wasn't burnt, it was caramelized. Gloria from Quilting Club arrived in a red feathered hat, insisting it was festive, not ridiculous. One of the neighborhood boys pointed at the tree and shouted, "You got real candy canes," like I'd pulled off a magic trick. Laughter filled the house. Real laughter, the kind that isn't afraid to echo. No forced smiles, no passive-aggressive glances, no quiet calculations about what I might owe someone later. Just people. People who showed up. And then, just before dessert, a small envelope arrived by mail. No return address. Inside was a card. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Hope you're doing well. By Emily and Nate." I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. I walked to the kitchen drawer and slid it inside, next to the first card. And then I served pie. Because this was the dinner that mattered. Not the one I'd planned a week ago, not the one that never happened. This one, with mismatched plates and chairs that creaked and people laughing loud over stories that had nothing to do with blood, but everything to do with love. I looked around the room as someone turned on Bing Crosby from an old speaker. I smiled, and I realized something. I hadn't lost my family. I just stopped waiting for people who didn't want to be one. That night, after everyone had left, I stood in the doorway with a dish towel slung over my shoulder, the last of the pie cooling by the window, the sound of laughter still echoing faintly in my ears. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. There were half-drunk mugs of cocoa on the side tables, crumbs on the rug, fingerprints on the fridge, a paper star made by a little boy named Isaiah now hung crookedly from the tree. The place felt lived in, not just visited, not just used, but loved. I poured myself a glass of red wine and stepped out onto the porch. The sky was clear, winter blue and speckled with stars. My breath curled in front of me, visible and real. I wrapped myself in Randall's old blanket and sank into the rocking chair. His chair. For the first time in nearly a year, I didn't feel like I was keeping a place for him. I felt like he was still keeping a place for me. Inside, the tree twinkled gently in the window. The light spilled out across the floor and onto the porch, wrapping around me like a final word. Randall used to say, "You don't need blood to build a family. You need heart." He was right. This year, I stopped trying to make people remember me, and I started remembering myself. I stopped cooking for people who wouldn't come. I stopped writing messages to inboxes that stayed unread. I stopped holding space at a table for people who made me feel like a leftover. And instead, I built something else. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of love, out of presence. The next morning, I woke early, not out of sadness, but out of intention. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, opened the window to let in the December air, and sat down to write Randall a letter. Not because I was broken, but because I was whole. I wrote, "They didn't come this year, Randall, but you did. You never left. And this house, this life you helped me rebuild, it's full now with people,
with purpose, with light. I placed the letter in the small wooden box by the fireplace, the one Randall made for our anniversary, the one he carved with trembling hands and too much glue. I lit a single candle and let it burn all the way down, because this year, the lights stay on. Not because I'm waiting, but because I finally stopped. I've stopped apologizing for being too soft, too sentimental, too much. I stopped trying to fit back into rooms where I was no longer welcome. They chose another table, so I built my own, and I'll keep building, chair by chair, light by light, pie by pie, until this house is everything I ever needed it to be. Not a place to wait, but a place to live.
If this story found a place in your heart, if you've ever felt forgotten but chose to keep going, then this space is for you. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that healing is possible, even after the silence. Subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild yourself one quiet moment at a time. And if you're still learning how, you don't have to do it alone. We tell stories that see you, that honor you, that remind you you are not invisible. You're just getting started. So stay with us. The porch night's on, and there's always a seat at this table.